FTL jump successful.
In today's video, we're going to check out the newly released AMD preview driver that adds support for Helldivers 2 on the RX 6800 XT. We're going to look at 4K and 1440p. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it.
Something here.
I've chosen Malevolent Creek as the test ground planet because it is a very demanding planet, and that's kind of what I wanted to go for, to see the worst case scenario basically. And this is our settings. We're going to begin with 1440p native with the current recommended drivers 24.1.1 on the left and the preview drivers 24.2.1 on the right. I'm going to expand a little bit on my previous 6800 XT video where I only took a look at 1440p. This time we're going to take a look at 4K as well in a few different quality render scale settings just to see if we can get a 60 FPS experience at 4K, because we're at 1440p 60 FPS at the moment. But we can actually do 4K 60 with some tweaks as well. But let's take a look and see if there's any differences, because according to the driver release notes, there's been Helldiver 2 optimizations. Although to be fair, they do state that they're mostly stability oriented, which, looking at my 7900 XTX video I released yesterday, that is actually true. My game was a lot more stable on the 7900 XTX with the preview drivers than it was with the current recommended drivers, so that is good. But as far as performance though, I'm not really seeing much of a difference here. It seems to be about the same. As a matter of fact, I did record about 10 minutes worth of gameplay with these 1440p native settings. Why don't we move towards the end of the recording to see if there's been any changes in the averages and 1% lows between the two drivers. And as you can see, there are really no differences. It's about the same. There will always be some variation, even though you're doing the same mission, same map, depending on the RNG gods and how they bless you. You know, if you get to kill the automatons that release the flares before the dropship comes, you know, that can affect the frame times and 1% lows as well, of course. But I actually never had any crashing experiences with the 6800 XT on the current 24.1.1 driver. So far it's good on both. Why don't we check out 1440p ultra quality? Because right now we are GPU bound, which is good. We want to remain that way. Let's see if 1440p ultra quality remains that way as well. Let's go through the settings and drop from native to ultra quality render scale. We're going to remain at 1440p, and then we're going to jump onto 4K after this one. But at 1440p with ultra quality render scale, we're able to remain around 80 to 70 FPS. As a matter of fact, this actually feels really, really good. It's kind of ideal. I like to play around 90 to 120 FPS personally if I can, but these frame rates are pretty good. And kind of a similar thing that I saw with my previous look at the 7900 XTX and comparing these drivers as well is that oftentimes it was the new driver where the performance always was a little bit lower than the previous. So I don't know if that means anything, because like I stated previously, there are differences in the missions, even though you're in the same map, but it's been consistent that the averages and 1% lows on the new preview driver are usually a little bit lower than they are on 24.1.1. And as a matter of fact, I ran into another issue with the 6800 XT and the preview drivers that I will talk about. It's probably an issue that most people probably won't even have to deal with, but I did, and I will be pointing it out in a second. If we skip forward about 5 minutes though, we can see that the current 24.1.1 driver is around 5% faster on the averages and around 10% faster on the 1% low. So again, does that mean that we noticing a performance regression with the preview drivers, or is it just the differences in the mission that is leading to these numbers not matching? Again, they would never match even if I was using the same driver, because there will always be variations. But from what I've noticed from my previous 7900 XTX video and this one, is that the current 24.1.1 driver is consistently ahead by a little bit. So I don't know what to make of that. But anyway, let's move on to 4K, where I ran into some interesting issues with the preview driver. Let's rifle through the settings real quick. We're going to keep the ultra quality render scale for 4K because without it we would be in the 40s or maybe even 30s. But with ultra quality render scale we can remain between 50 and 60, which in my opinion is still very enjoyable. Obviously not ideal for a shooter co-op game. You'd want to be at 60, but still it's not so bad. And again, this is one of the most demanding planets in the game when there's a lot of stuff going on. Speaking of which, when there is a lot of stuff going on, especially when you zoom in with the scope, the performance does drop into the 40s, as you can see. Now, another thing you may not have noticed yet is that my card is very well overclocked on the current 24.1.1 driver, but on the preview driver, I'm running it at its stock configuration. So it's slightly overclocked by the factory. It's an ROG Strix OC LC model, so it is slightly overclocked from the reference, but it's still running at 2.4 gigahertz, whereas the overclocked version is running 2.7 gigahertz. The reason why is because for some reason my 6800 XT became completely unstable in this game when I was running it overclocked. I would get constant game crashes, and it was actually a driver crash as well, which I do not experience in any other game. Even in this game with the 24.1.1 driver, I've been running the card overclocked no problem. And at 1440p, to be fair, even with the preview driver, it runs no problem. But for some reason at 4K, it wasn't stable. I ran through a lot of crashes, and I even tried to lower the overclock marginally lower and lower, but it still kept crashing. So I just set it to the default where it ran just fine. So that's really the only issue that I've had with the preview driver. Whereas before on the 7900 XTX, the game was very unstable. With the preview drivers, that's improved a lot. For the 6800 XT, I personally never had any problems with it, pairing it with a 5900X. And now, overclocking it, running the game at 4K, for some reason, it's unstable. So I don't know what to make of that, but I can't run the card overclocked. So, is it because of that overclock that the preview drivers averages and 1% lows are lower? I don't know, it's hard to say, because as I've shown you in this video and in my previous video, is that the preview driver tends to have slightly lower averages and 1% lows rather regularly. So I honestly don't know what to make of it. I think for the 7900 XTX or RX 7000 in general, I think the preview driver is good for this game. I've heard from some viewers that they're having stuttering issues with Warzone and some other games. I don't play those games, so I can't really say. I don't know. But for this game, I think 24.1.1 on the 6800 XT is better, at least from what I'm seeing, right? So, yeah. Anyway, why don't we drop from ultra quality to quality, see if we can get a more 60 FPS experience at 4K with the 6800 XT. Let's do that. Let's drop to the quality render scale from ultra quality. Let's go through the settings real quick, and we'll drop it to quality render scale. And stay tuned, because after this, we're actually going to drop the graphical settings as well. See if we can get a more closer to high refresh rate experience at 4K with the 6800 XT. There's actually some weird issues with that one. I can't wait to show you. But here, at 4K with the quality render scale, we are actually a lot closer to a 60 FPS experience. Again, for some reason, the averages and 1% lows on the preview driver side are noticeably lower. Is it crazy? No, not really. It's a few FPS, but that is around 10% or so. So it is somewhat noticeable. And at this point, I'm beginning to think that there is a little bit of performance regression on the preview driver. So maybe they had to do that to make the game more stable. Just speculation on my part. I don't know. But I can only speak about what I'm seeing. As far as visual quality, I said at the very beginning, at the first day the game came out and I dropped my video, I did say that I believe the render scale that they're using here is a spatial upscaler like FSR1, and other people seem to think the same thing. Actually, it's even Digital Foundry, Ollie, he did a review of the game and he said the same thing. And I say that because even at 4K quality, there is a bit of aliasing. It doesn't do as good of a job as FSR DLSS. I mean, we've gotten used to how well those upscaling techniques work, and this one is not as good. It's a bit blurrier, but I would say at 4K ultra quality looks fine. Quality, it's okay. At 1440p it doesn't look great, but again, this game is all about performance and lower latency, so I think it's fine. I would like to see FSR2 and maybe DLSS be added if possible. I know this engine is a bit outdated and probably at this point they've customized the heck out of it. But anyway, these are the differences between the two drivers. Now, I do want to take a look at lowering the graphical settings while we're on the quality render scale. See if we can get closer to that 90 FPS. And I ran into some strange issues that I can't really make sense of why. Why don't we check it out? Let's go through the settings and I'll show you what I did. I essentially went to the graphical settings and I just moved it over by 1. So from ultra to high, from high to medium, as you can see, I'm just going over to the left by 1. I'm leaving ambient occlusion, screen space, global illumination, and anti-aliasing enabled, obviously. We're just lowering some of the graphical presets. And we do actually see a pretty good performance gain, actually. We're in the 80s. Actually, a little higher on the current driver. Again, the preview driver seems to be a bit lower, but if you're noticing something is wrong, we're getting some pretty bad stutters and horrendous 1% lows. And I'm not really sure why that is, because I mean, I can see us maybe being CPU bound, but this should not happen. I mean, we're using the 5900X here, but I did use the 5900X even with my 4090, and it was clearly CPU bound in most of the times, and it ran fine. So I don't know why this is happening. This is really strange. It's like a intermittent stutter that happens. It happens on both sides. It's not like it's only happening on the preview driver or on the current recommended driver. It happens on both. You can see it on the frame time graph and you can see it on the 1% lows. They're both at 3 FPS. So this is not an enjoyable experience at all for any game, but especially this one. And I really don't know why. I've never actually seen this one before in any other game. So look at this on the 24.1.1 on the left, using the orbital strike. The game almost got struck down too. Jesus, that's crazy. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a shame because lowering the graphical settings, yeah, the image quality degrades a bit, but it's not really that bad. I can definitely see people wanting to play the game like this. It still looks great. I think the game looks good in general anyway, but even lowering some of these settings to claw back some performance, it looks fine. So it's kind of a shame that you can't do this, and I don't know why this is happening. I've never seen a game's performance get worse by lowering graphical settings, except for this one. So yeah, but this is the only time that I've actually tried to lower the graphical settings in any of my videos with the 6800 XT. So I don't know if this also happens in other cards as well. Maybe I'll check it out at some point, and then if I do find a trend, maybe make a video about it. I don't know. But I think that about wraps it up. Again, we see the current driver being a little bit faster than the preview driver on the averages and 1% lows in general. So I, at this point, am willing to say that there is probably a little bit of performance regression with the preview drivers. And again, maybe they had to do it to make the game more stable. So while the game did get more stable on the 7900 XTX, which did have problems, on the 6800 XT, for me, it was always stable. And with the preview drivers, what became unstable is running the graphics card overclocked. Only at 4K. I don't know. This game has been quite a trip. I do hope they fix it because the game's great. The core gameplay is awesome. It's a lot of fun. And you guys should try it out if you can. But anyway, I think that'll be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed my look at the preview drivers with the 6800 XT, and I wanted to check out 4K as well because I never got the chance to on my 6800 XT focused video. But anyway, if you guys did like this, give it a like. I would highly appreciate it, and consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. I appreciate you watching. Leave your comments below. Any questions or suggestions or criticisms you have, I would like to read them. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.